Hi, this is Rick for EDU Mobile, and now we're on to the activities that start an intent for a particular result. So the idea here is that we have a first activity that goes ahead and has a button that starts a second activity through an intent, and then that second activity will have a choice to be made, and we can press one of two buttons and then get the result back to the first activity. Now, there's a couple of things that are a little bit different here. First of all, in the Android manifest, we have exactly the same code, so that's not different. We're just declaring a new activity with the name detail activity, whatever the second activity is. Now, in the main activity, we want to set up an intent when we press the detail button. We'll go ahead and look at that activity main XML. We have a button. It just has a name in a string table. And then the onClick handler is the detail button handler. And so we go back to that activity. And then in that detail button handler, I want to set up an intent with the detail activity class, but the difference is I want to start activity for result on that intent. So what happens is we pass the second activity an intent. That intent may contain data. In other words, I could put extras into this intent before starting the activity for result. But the important thing here is the start activity for result method expects an intent and then an integer. And this integer is just code. And this says this is a second kind of check. Not only are we going to check that the result is okay, but it is the result in the intent that I wanted to get back. So this is kind of a code number. If we send an intent to a system activity, then these result codes have defined names, and we will do that later in the course. But for now, I'm just going to pass it an integer. Any old integer will do, a 1. So when that comes back, and when we look at the detail view controller, we'll see how that comes back. There is a method that is called back on activity result, which gets a request code, a result code, and the data from an intent. Now, this is the same intent that we pass it in, but we're going to add data to the intent as a result to get passed back. More on that in a second. So here we're checking the result code against activity.result OK, and we're also checking the request code, which is this number, against the number I expect to get. This number is internal as far as the detail activity goes, but I send an intent with a request code of 1. I expect to get back an intent with a request code of 1, and we're just making sure that those match. Now I'm going to get a text view. This text view is on our activity main XML. I get that text view. I'm just calling it TV. You can call it Fred. It really doesn't matter. And then I'm just going to get it by finding that view by ID, RID text view. And then I'm getting a result. The result is a string. I'm going to get the string extra that has the key choice. Now remember that key because that is set in the detail activity when we pass the intent back. And then finally I'm going to set the text on that text view to whatever we get in that string. Alright, so now let's look at the detail activity. We have passed the intent over to the detail activity. Now let's see what happens over here. In the detail activity I have two buttons and they are labeled 1 and 2. So essentially I'm doing the same thing I did before when I was sending data to the detail, but now this time I'm going to send it back from the detail. So there's an on-click handler here called button pressed, and again I'm getting which button it is by getting the text off the button. So I'm setting that to a string, and then I'm setting up an intent, but notice that this intent, rather than making a new intent, it is getting the intent that was passed to start this activity. And then I'm going to put an extra into that intent, again with the key choice, and then the text off the button. And then I set result for the activity to be result OK with the data I passed. Finally, I call finish. Now finish destroys the activity. So before I destroy the activity, before I call finish, I want to make sure that I set the result in in this class so that the main activity gets the result back. So this is how this works. Let's go ahead and run it. And actually, I already have it running. So here I have my main activity. I have a button that says detail. I click the button, and I get the second activity, 1 or 2. I press 1, and then I finish that activity, and the detail, or the actual first activity's text, is set to 1. And of course, if I press 2 in the second activity, press 2, and it will come back after finishing and set this text string to 2. So this illustrates how to get data back using start activity for result. Thank you very much.